Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Like always, I will be your host tonight, Mr. Dead Sleep. Right now, I'll be taking you through 3 scary stories that I found on NoSleep Reddit. Before we get started, likes and subscribes are appreciated, and if you want to comment, I hope you do. But right now, just sit back, lay back, whatever's most comfortable for you, and enjoy. Our first story of the night is titled, "There's a new social media trend called skin posting. I wish I'd never heard of it." It was my friend Parker that started it. Skin posting, that is. A blurry picture of what looked like the inside of her wrist appeared in all our Instagram feeds, captioned simply, "Skin post." I quickly scrolled past and shook my head, wondering why Parker always had to be so weird. Her brand of surreal humor sailed straight over the heads of everyone that knew her, and yet she always had a full factory production process of more incoming. When I logged on next, a few days later, I saw there were a few more posts of extreme close-ups of people's faces, backs, and who knows where else's. In the next hour, mine and everyone else's feeds became saturated with skin. Some seemed to believe it was an odd body positivity trend. Others thought it was a statement for racial unity. My grandmother, who always had a macabre sense of humor, posted a comment on one of them. "Oh, is it the anniversary of Jeffrey Dahmer's death or something?" I was getting weirded out by the whole thing, how the viral grip of bandwagoning spread like wildfire. I decided to call Parker. We hadn't talked in weeks, and I wanted to see what she thought about how much her random 3 a.m. post had gained traction. "Hey girlfriend," she answered ecstatically. "You'll never guess what happened. 3 of the top 10 influencers on Instagram have started skin posting." She cackled loudly, and I had to take my phone away from my ear until she stopped. "That's great, Parker. Who knew something like this would blow up so much?" I replied with severely less enthusiasm. This was suddenly the last thing I wanted to talk about. I'd seen enough skin to last me the rest of my life. Frankly, it freaked me out. Why would people do something so strange just for social media clout? "I haven't seen a skin post from you yet. I just started a skin posting page on Facebook. Could you help me out with it? I've been the only poster so far. I need more contributors." I closed my eyes and squeezed the bridge of my nose. She wasn't going to take no for an answer, was she? "I'm not really comfortable with that. Not really my thing," I sighed. "Oh, come on, you owe me one. Ever since I saved your butt from that creeper at the bar." She let her words hang in the air until I answered. "Sure, whatever, but this is the last favor you can milk for me on that. And I'm using my alt account." "Thanks, sweetheart. I'll send you the link." I braced myself, strangely leery of taking one simple photograph. I decided to choose my neck, zooming in the camera until all that could be seen was my skin. Maybe I was self-conscious about my body. Maybe this would be good for me. After I took the picture, the text with the link came and I switched accounts and posted it. It had a fake name for when I wanted to comment or post without others being able to recognize me. The first comment came almost immediately from an account with no profile picture. It simply said, $1. It gave me an uneasy feeling to say the least. I checked the account and saw the account had no posts. Almost like it had just been created. $12 came the next comment from a different account. No profile picture on this one either. I couldn't help but watch, wondering where this was going. $300, and the numbers kept rising. I started getting message requests as well, but I ignored those. It had been an hour, maybe 2, but I just watched dumbstruck. With a burst of effort, I deleted the post and closed the app. That was enough internet for me for the day. I sat on the floor next to my couch with my phone on the floor next to me, thrown entirely off balance. What was wrong with these people? Even if they were just joking. Anonymity does funny things to people. Could they be serious? I had no idea who these people were. I'd always been paranoid, but it made no sense that people would be auctioning for my skin on a public social network. It wasn't the dark web or anything. Nevertheless, I was relieved I'd used an alt account. My phone buzzed next to me, and almost with an audible sigh of relief, I checked it. My heart sank. "Why did you delete your post?" from an unknown number. Then another text slid in with a ding. "I will pay top dollar for your skin, $20,000, final offer." I felt my heart start beating rapidly. The soles of my feet suddenly slick on the wooden floor. "I don't know what you're talking about," I started typing. "I think you have the wrong," when the next text came in like a brick to my gut. "Felicia Jennings, 8852 Park Avenue, 21 years old. That right?" Then they began to list my birthday, social security number, and the name of my childhood dog. "Come on, you'll never get a better offer, Felicia. You can live without your skin, especially with that kind of dough." I could almost imagine them laughing, thinking how dumb I must be not to take them up on this deal. $50,000 right now. I have the tools all ready. And then a picture of my front yard, the new dent on my car clearly visible. A heavy knock on the door nearly gave me a heart attack. I leapt to my feet immediately, adrenaline propelling me through my bedroom door, over my bed, and under it on the far side. Dust bunnies on the wood floor scattered as I invaded their burrow. The stranger began banging on the door, the noise getting angrier and angrier until it seemed he was throwing his body at the door in an attempt to break it off its hinges. And then silence. I cowered in the cramped space under my bed, wondering why I had the bright idea to store so much stuff there, until the meaning of the silence set in. While the man who wanted my skin had been knocking on the door, I could use the noise to determine his exact location. Now that he had stopped, however, and then I heard a tapping on the glass of my bedroom window, where I was hiding. I poked my head out from under the bed. I looked through the window, and what I saw a man, red in the moonlight, not ruddy, not flushed with effort and anger. He shined a glistening crimson, muscles bared, steaming into the cold night air. His teeth were bared and his eyes were wild, but I don't know if he even had lips to cover his teeth, or even eyelids. Then he punched through the window. He jammed his arm forward through the window's glass and reached for me, his grasping fingers flinging blood into my face. I somehow managed to leap out from under the bed and duck under his flailing arm and kept running. The tinkle of broken glass behind me told me that the man of red was climbing in after me. I wasn't safe here anymore. I needed to get away. I saw the open door to the basement and made a split-second decision to duck inside and inch it closed as quickly as I dared. I had no idea if there were more of them out there, slavering for just a piece of my skin to cover up their naked wrongness. I couldn't risk it. Maybe that man, that thing, would think I had run outside instead of into the basement, too excited for the chase to consider my hiding place. I clutched the cold doorknob tightly, there at the top of the darkened stairway, hardly daring to breathe. No quick thumps to show a quick pursuit in the wrong direction. Silence. And in that silence, I dropped my phone down the stairs. The clatter, even though it had only gone down 3 steps, felt enough to wake the dead, and I knew he had heard. I hurriedly reached down and grabbed my phone and returned to the door. I pushed my back to the door and locked my legs against the ends of the shelves. I thanked my past self for installing shelves all along the stairway. The earnest thumps on the door began almost immediately, accompanied by a high-pitched, keening cry. The creature yearned so strongly for what I had taken for granted all my life. He could barely contain himself, as if every second without it was agony. Perhaps it is. That doesn't mean I'm going to brace myself against this door until he breaks the door down, or until help arrives. The police are on their way, but they're still 20 minutes out. This might be the last thing I ever write, every impact jarring me as I frantically write my story. I don't know why I'm writing this. Perhaps so I'll be remembered or simply be more ready for what is coming. I guess we'll see what I'll do with my $50,000. Okay, our next story of the night is titled, There is Something Coming to Earth, and We Are Not Prepared. My name and identity is irrelevant. The only thing you must know is that after posting this information, I'll either be dead or on the run. Well, it doesn't matter in the end. Okay, where do I begin? In 1962, NASA detected an anomaly in Earth's orbit. In the beginning, it was thought that it was just faulty machinery, but it was later confirmed that the signal emanating from that object was indeed real. The information about the signal was not released to the public. The signal originated from a previously discovered object which was named the Black Knight satellite. It was first believed to be of Soviet origin, but that was debunked shortly after they saw what the signal contained. At first it was gibberish and untranslatable, but someone noticed on the printed physical copy of the signal that it vaguely resembled Egyptian hieroglyphics. They were able to roughly translate the contents of the message with the aid of linguistic experts. The message was short and cryptic. Remain silent. After we were able to decipher that, another signal emanated from the Black Knight a few months later, a set of coordinates. 2 sets of coordinates to be specific. One was the moon, and the other was on the periphery of the solar system. Since the moon was much closer to NASA, in collaboration with the Soviet space program, sent a manned mission to the moon in 1967 consisting of 2 American astronauts and 2 Soviet cosmonauts. 2 years before the official landing that we all know of, they landed near the specified coordinates and made their way to the location. At the site, there was a distinct metallic protrusion going up from the ground with what appeared to be a button. At first, they didn't act, not knowing what would happen if it were pressed. But with the pressure from those back on Earth, one Soviet cosmonaut begrudgingly accepted to press the button, while the others made sure to make what they deemed a safe distance from the potential threat. When pressed, the ground reportedly shook. Then an opening appeared in the white dust, revealing a staircase. The Americans and Soviets voted who will go inside and who will remain on the surface, so that someone has contact with Earth. They decided that 1 American and 1 Soviet will go underground and the other 2 will remain on the surface. As the 2 descended down the ancient staircase and faded into the dark, their signal faded as well, up to the point where they lost contact. Minutes passed by, yet they felt like hours. As the other 2 on the surface wanted to return to base because of low oxygen supply, a glimmer of light was seen in the long staircase, then a second. Helmet flashlights. Once the 2 who descended came back to the light, they brought back with them a small chip, and that chip rewrote human history as we know it. That small chip was about the size of a USB stick, yet the amount of information held inside it was staggering, even by modern standards. Designs, scientific information, star maps of not only the Milky Way, but other galaxies as well. But most importantly, a historical record. Throughout the years, we had some success in translating the texts. There are still gaps, some wider than others, but we have the gist of it. I'll tell you the history of our benefactors briefly. About 1.6 billion years ago, civilization emerged in a faraway galaxy. They were, as far as we know, the first sentient species in the known universe. Their beginning was similar to ours. First, they slowly crawled out of caves, then conquered their planet and later on ventured toward the stars, eventually conquering their solar system as well. With time, they noticed that they were alone, At first, they saw it as a plus. They advanced their technology and conquered more stars. They developed wormhole stabilizers and were able to travel between systems with great speed. Soon enough, they perfected that technology, and with that, conquered their galaxy, establishing a highway network of wormhole stations in each system. Yet, the galaxy they conquered was void of almost all life, save for simple life forms and the occasional complex life, but no sentience. They grew wise and they grew lonely, and they set a goal for themselves to seed the universe with life. First, they began their own galaxy. Then they were able to make a large wormhole in the center of their galaxy, powered by the supermassive black hole there. That enabled them to travel to other galaxies. Their manifest destiny spread like wildfire. They seeded thousands of galaxies. Life sprouted and thrived under their watchful eye. One of the worlds they laid their hands on was our own, Earth. Life was already present here, but upon finding an upstart primate species on its surface, they gifted it sentience. But sadly, we were not born in the Golden Age. They were declining. They were in a state of war that already lasted for a couple million years, and they were losing. The enemy they fought is not known. Whether they are one of the species they uplifted which rebelled against them, or some other unknown entity from the dark corners of the universe, we do not know. All we know is that a force that could destroy entire galaxies and cripple an entire civilization the size of which our minds can hardly comprehend is on the loose. The second set of coordinates given to us were the coordinates to the machine that produced the artificial wormhole which connects the rest of our galaxy. I write this to you in the very last days of humanity, for we have not listened. I now understand that message sent to us. They wanted to buy us time. I don't know if it would have helped, but it's too late now. We have opened the gates of hell, and there is no turning back. Goodbye, and may God have mercy upon our souls. Okay, let's get into our last scary story of the night. This one is titled, I Was a Guard on the Night Train to the Cemetery. I liked working with the dead until last night. My shift began, as it always did, at 11 p.m. when I arrived at the station and walked along the platform when the train was waiting. The driver's cabin at the front of the train is self-contained. There is an access hatch for loading goods in the front carriage, which is also the way I entered and exited. First, I did a walkthrough of the carriages to check the cleaners had been thorough. The smell of detergent lingered throughout the 4 carriages, and all the surfaces looked to have been wiped down, so that was fine. It usually was. Last week, on the Monday, had been an exception. I had found a cigarette butt lying on the floor. I had picked it up, wiped carefully around where it had been with the tissue, and filed a report with my supervisor. I had placed the offending item in an envelope and attached it with a paperclip. My supervisor works 9 to 5 and never seems to lock his office door, so I left the report on his desk. If there had been consequences, if a reprimand had been issued about the cigarette butt, no one had told me. I finished my walkthrough by checking the emergency exit, which is at the end of the rear carriage, was secure. It was locked as it should be. This done, I returned to the front carriage. The interior of the carriages are empty apart from fluorescent strips fixed into their ceilings to light the way. I exited via the access hatch and went to greet the loaders. It was quiet in the station. The last commuter train for the day had departed 30 minutes ago. A cross-country express passed through at 20 past midnight. Most people did not know about the night train I worked on. We simply got on with what we did at a time when we were quietly out of sight. The coffins are brought to the station by road, then placed on trolleys. I counted 24 coffins as they were loaded onto the train over the course of the next 40 minutes. This tallied with the note the loading crew presented, so I signed off on the consignment. The coffins and those they carried were in my care now. They came from the city's public hospitals. They were individuals who had slipped off the grid. The homeless, drug addicts, crime victims, some who had taken their own lives, all reduced to John or Jane Does with no family or friends prepared or able to give them a decent burial, so the city authorities stepped in. I've always been a civic-minded person and took pride in the role I played in this. It was not a job I had planned for. I'd been a conductor on one of the commuter trains for 20 years. One day, it had been a Saturday, early evening, a young man was mouthing off to me. I think he had been trying to impress the woman he was traveling with. I could smell from his breath that he had been drinking. He kept on cussing me, the obscenities spiraling, until I cuffed him across the face. Just once, not that hard. They wanted to fire me, but I dug my heels in. Then they offered me a job as a guard on the night train to the cemetery. I said yes. I did my second walkthrough of the shift. The coffins were placed out on the carriage floors, where they would remain until they were unloaded at the cemetery. This is a sprawling, actually pretty interesting place on the northern outskirts of the city. I went there once in the daytime, not long after I started my new job. I always meant to research its history. I had never got around to it, though. A familiar hum filled the carriages. The driver had arrived and was starting up the engine. I moved back through the front carriage and took my place on a flip-down seat. The journey would take about 90 minutes. Apart from the rattling of the carriage wheels on the tracks, it is quiet. Quiet enough to hear what sounds like sighing coming from inside the coffins. The first time I heard this, on my first ever shift, I was badly spooked. Then I reasoned out it was simply gases being expelled from the bodies. All part of the natural process and nothing to be worried about. About 30 minutes into the journey, I did another walkthrough, just to double check everything was okay. It was, apart from one of the coffin lids in the rear carriage was slightly open. The lids are not hinged but stuck on. It's a matter of economics that the coffins are of poor quality, made of thin sections of wood, and on this occasion, the rattling progress of the train must have shook the lid loose. I slid it closed and went on my way. With 15 minutes to go to our arrival at the cemetery, I decided to make sure the lid had not worked its way open again. I walked through the carriages until I reached the rear one and came to a sudden halt. Cold fear ran through me. The coffin lid was lying askew on the floor. The body inside the coffin was sitting up. Its eyes were closed. Its lips were pursed. Its mottled skin was gray and waxy in the fluorescent light. It had a green hospital robe on. It had been, a man. I can make out a tattoo on the body's neck. 4 inked letters. Jane. Had that been his wife or lover, I wondered, and fear became sorrow as I thought of a life lost. I have no medical training, but I considered that this could once again be something to do with gases that are produced post-mortem. Or was it muscles constricting? Yes, that made sense. It was horrific and heartbreaking, but that was all it was. I steeled myself. I could not leave the body like this. What would the crew who unloaded the coffins at the graveyard think of me if they saw it? Sometimes it felt like my pride was the only thing I had left in life, and it was pride that made me step up to the body. I placed my hands on the green hospital robe and pressed. There was resistance, like the body was locked solid. I pressed harder and was able to slowly lower the body back down into lying position. Then I retrieved the lid, put it back on top of the coffin. I was thinking how to now properly secure it when the train drew to a halt. My mind was so addled that it took me a moment to realize that this was because we had arrived at the cemetery. Breathing deeply, trying to compose myself, I walked back to the front carriage. I needed to open up for the unloaders. After sliding open the access hatch, I stepped out of the train. I wanted to breathe in the fresh night air. Behind me, I heard the crew bustling around, watched as they began to transfer coffins onto trolleys to be transported to the chapel of rest. They would be buried, as they always were, in graves marked with simple wooden crosses at first light. I was still in a daze, and I did not hear the first time what one of the offloading crew had said to me. I said sorry and asked them to repeat it. I heard, "Mistake. There's been a mistake." They explained that when they reached the rear carriage and lifted one of the coffins, they realized from its weight that it was empty. They'd slid open the lid to double check, and yes, there had been nothing there. That can't be, I thought, and was desperately trying to work out what could have happened. But the crew wanted me to sign off on the note, which had now been handwritten on it that one of the coffins had not been offloaded because there was no body inside. The crew wanted to get on with taking the coffins, as they did have to get to the chapel of rest, and the driver was leaning out of his window and signaling at me to get going. I climbed back into the front carriage, closed the access hatch, and took my place on the flip-down seat. I felt numb, nauseous. The train set off. I was alone in the carriages, just me and the empty coffin in the rear carriage. There was a rational reason for this, I tried to tell myself. There was nothing else, nothing untoward back there, or else the offloading crew would have seen it. I knew I should go through the carriages to look for myself, perhaps try the emergency exit, check it was still locked. I could not. I sat, paralyzed with fear. My mind was racing. The carriage wheels were rattling, and there was a new sound of something scraping along the floor, like feet being dragged. Was it getting louder? Coming towards me? I closed my eyes and prayed and waited. The rest of the journey passed in this way. As the train juddered to a halt, I opened my eyes. My legs felt so weak I could barely stand, but I managed to make it off the train. I stood on the platform. It was still hours before dawn and the station was deserted. I stood there and I wept. I did not file a report. Instead, I left a handwritten letter of resignation on my supervisor's desk. I did not give any reasons why I had resigned. Some things cannot be explained. Okay, well, that was creepy and our last spooky story of the night. I hope you enjoyed yourselves like I did. If you haven't already, I hope you give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more weekly spooky stories. Well, it's time for me to go, but I will be back before you know it. I'm Mr. Dead Sleep. Good night.